purpose of this tutorial is just to get you started in Photoshop and create good composition using a few tools. Let's get started. Find and open Photoshop. It's in the same menu as your other Adobe things. We're going to click Create New. Here are the different sizes you can use, but I like to customize my sizes. Make sure that you set it to inches for this project, and we're just going to make it the size of a piece of paper. So 11 inches will be the top number, 8.5 will be the bottom number, and you want to make sure it is set to landscape instead of portrait. All these other things we're going to leave the default and click Create. So this is what Photoshop looks like. In the middle is our canvas, and on the left side are our tools. If you hover over each tool, it tells you a little bit about what it is, what its name is, and some examples of how they work to some degree. We're going to choose this paint bucket tool that's right in the center. There are lots of ways to get color. There are color choices down below, and I currently have open over here the color panel. If you don't see this, you can simply go up to Window and make sure color is selected. Swatches is another way to find colors, but I just chose a blue color and then click in the middle to fill it in. It fills the whole canvas with color. Down here is the layer that I just filled, and I'm going to unlock this layer. The first layer is always locked, and I always like to unlock it. Then I go back, and if you click on the word layer 0, I will change this to the word background. Now if I go back over to this paint bucket tool and I click and hold, I see the other options underneath there, just like in Premiere. I'm going to choose the gradient tool this time. The gradient tool is a little bit different. I'm also going to click on our new layer tool. Photoshop is all about layers, and everything we do, we try to do on a different layer unless there's a reason to keep it on one layer. So this gradient tool brings up a different window, and I can choose more than one color. That a gradient is when one color melds into another color. So here we can see I have a color. There's a little bar down here, and I can change this color. I'm going to change it to a different green. And then if I click on the little icon on the other side, I'm going to change this color to a goldy color. You choose the colors you want. I'm going to just adjust this a little bit. Click OK. So here I can add colors by clicking below the bar. You see a new little icon comes up. Want to be careful with that. Make sure you're using good color sense and good color choices. You don't want to just put any color in there. You want to make it look like one color is really melding into the other. I can also take away those colors by just pulling the little icon back up and out of the way. Makes it disappear. Now I can also slide these sliders to get a little bit of different effects. Pretty happy with that, so I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to have some crosshairs. I'm going to take my crosshair and drag it across the screen. This results in color on layer 1. I am going to press Ctrl Z, and I'm going to drag the opposite direction, and you will see that my gradient also goes in the opposite direction. No matter how I take the crosshairs across the canvas each time, makes a difference what the gradient ends up looking like. I'm going to drag this from top to bottom and keep this as my gradient on top of the blue layer. And at this time we're going to take a little pause, and we are going to stop to save. So File, Save. You can shut any windows that pop open. I don't think you will get this window, however. And we are going to save this as First Practice. You might make sure that it's going to your desktop. Your window will look a little different than this, since this is my Mac and you guys are using the PC. Click OK on here. So we're ready to start the second part of this practice. We are now going to learn a tool called the Paintbrush Tool. It is just a couple above the tools that we were using, the paint bucket and the gradient tool. We're going to click on that. And we're just going to go out and pick a color and create just a little circle or a blob or some kind of a mark on your paper. You'll notice that this writes right on top of that gradient layer that I already did. I really didn't want to do that. We're going to Control Z, and we're going to create a new layer. Now, when I draw the circle now, I can go back out to my selection tool, and you'll notice it gets handles on it, and we can move this anywhere we want. We could not have done that if it had been attached to the layer before it. At this point, stop the video, play around with the brush a little bit, then erase what you've done or throw away that layer and come back to learn next steps. So for this part of the video, I am showing you how to choose a different brush. I am going to choose one that I've downloaded from the internet. You will get to do this in the next tutorial, how to find and download and then upload a brush. Currently I'm resizing the brush that I chose, which is a little skull. And when I resize it and I take my mouse back out to the screen, I can see kind of what size it is. So if you don't get it quite the size you want, you can type in the size. I'm going to make this 1,000. I think that'll be more the size that I want to use. Once you have the size you want, we can close that window. And you'll notice here that I have basically stamped a skull on this layer by itself. And I can move this skull because it's on its own layer. I can move this skull anywhere I want. Remember, this doesn't happen if I make it on one of the other color layers. It will be embedded in that within that color layer. I'm also going to go over here to that layer and click this little eye, which is going to make that disappear for a minute. It's not gone. It's just invisible. And I'm going to go back to the color layer this time to show you the difference here and stamp this directly on the color layer. And so you can see that's attached to that layer. When I move it around, I can't move the skull individually, the stamp individually. So now we're just going to go a couple below this brush tool to the eraser tool. The eraser tool does exactly what it sounds like. It erases things. I'm going to choose the very same skull stamp to show you how this brush tool can give us different effects. I'm going to resize this down. This time I'm going to select the green layer, and we're going to give this a stamp right on top of the other stamp I made. And you can see now I've exposed the blue that is on the very bottom layer. If I turn off the layer that I used the brush on, I can see the eraser layer. And I can tell this if I turn off both the layers because I can see the transparent background. Then when I turn them all back on, they layer on top of each other, exposing what I've done below. This really gives kind of a neat effect. It looks like there are blue outline around the eye of the skull. I can also take, and if I drag and hold the layer, I can move the layers around, which also give different effects depending on the order that I move my layers. So here I've moved my layers around a little bit more, and I'm going to take this third layer that I made and bring it all the way to the bottom. Now I have a blue background with some things showing through, and I have this little part here that I want to color in, and so I'm just going to color that in with the gradient. A little bit different effect than I had before. And now I am ready to add text. Use the text tool just as it is in Adobe Premiere, and it gives me the little text icon, and you can click anywhere. And I would just start first by typing the text that you want. I am going to type the word toxic. You might notice that I can't see the word. That is because it is below the solid layers of the gradient of layer 1 and the blue layer at the top that is the background layer. We're just going to move our text to the top, and now I can see it. At this point I can highlight my text. I can change it to the font style or the type style that I want. You can also go up to the select tool to resize it. Don't be afraid to make your text big and bold, especially if you're doing something that is poster style. So I'm going to create this bigger. I want it to be almost touching some of the edges, depending on the effect that I want to get. And you'll notice I'm bringing out what are called rulers. This is to show the rule of thirds. So in your videos with Pixar, you learn a little bit about the rule of thirds, and we use this both in static images and in video. So the rule of thirds says that we want to draw our eye to where the lines meet and create the 9 boxes. So I'm going to put this in the lower third, and I'm going to make it a little bigger. I'm going to have it just barely touching that skull, just overlapping it a little bit, and bringing the whole word to the edge of my page. This gives a very appealing composition and draws my eye to both the skull and the word toxic. To recolor text, instead of choosing from our color picker on the side, we go to the top of the page and click on the color next to the letter T. This is where you can choose any color that you would like, thinking about, again, your composition and your color. Another enhancement that I can do to text is to grab the select tool and come over to this little menu that is above the layer, and there are different treatments we can give, from darkening it to multiplying it, overlay, pin light, hard mix, and you can see that each one of these gives a little bit different look in relationship to the rest of the composition. So I'm going to use the overlay treatment. Then I am going to go out and I'm going to click and hold the Option key and drag this text layer. It makes an exact copy of the layer above it. And so you can see that when I turn on and off the layer. And then this top layer, I'm going to give a little bit different treatment to. I'm going to multiply it, and that's going to make it really dark. And then I'm going to just move it a little bitty bit. I'm nudging it with an arrow key, and we see that it gives this a look of as if it is got a shadow behind it, or cut out, or popping out. Gives a lot more depth. I'm going to go up and clear the guides by clicking View and Clear Guides to get rid of our rule of thirds. Then go up to File and Save. Remember, we have named it earlier, so it should save it as the same name. And we're done and ready to learn how to download your own brushes.